9:30 on ViuTVSix. Finally, there is a TV program exclusively for dogs. And of course, for humans who love their furry friends. Scientifically developed, pup-approved. The content is solely designed to appeal to man's best friend. Let your dog sit around TV and be stimulated and entertained by the exciting movements and objects. Or simply chill them out with soothing sounds and images. Just sit back and enjoy the fun of watching TV with your pooches. Dog TV, Saturday and Sunday nights at 8 on ViuTV6. Provocative stories that have changed lives. Insightful interviews with notable figures from the worlds of news, politics, and entertainment. ViuTV6 brings you one of the most esteemed news magazines. ABC News 2020. Sunday night at 9:30 on ViuTV6.
Good evening, I'm Britt Clennett in Hong Kong and welcome to ViuTV News. Coming up on tonight's show. North Korea launches yet another ballistic missile just days before G20 world leaders meet. China cracks down even harder on internet censorship, requiring all content to show core socialist values. Hong Kong's chief executive defends her executive council as the new team holds their first meeting. Well, a major announcement came from North Korea this afternoon as Pyongyang said its rockets now have the capability to hit anywhere in the world. That's after what it called a successful test launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile this morning. Here's Grace Lee with that report.
Another ballistic missile fired out of North Korea Tuesday morning, testing international patience even further. Japan says the missile flew for about 40 minutes and may have landed in the country's exclusive economic zone.
North Korea has again enforced a launch of a ballistic missile, ignoring repeated warnings from the international community.
It comes just days before world leaders meet for the G20 summit, where the U.S., China, Japan, and South Korea are expected to discuss efforts to rein in the reclusive state. Donald Trump has already held back-to-back calls with Tokyo and Beijing over the issue, with both Asian countries reaffirming their commitment to dealing with the North. Pyongyang has been rushing to develop a nuclear missile capable of hitting the U.S. Moon Jae-in has called for a National Security Council meeting in response to the latest launch. The South Korean leader met with Trump last week, where the U.S. president called for a determined response to North Korea and stressed the importance of an alliance between the two sides.
Well, China is calling for restraint following the latest missile test, but the pressure is mounting for Beijing to push back against Pyongyang. For more on that, here's Beijing correspondent Dan Epstein.
Well, China's foreign ministry spokesman Geng Shuang today has called for calm and restraint following the outcry about North Korea's latest missile test, which experts say, if the trajectory was slightly changed, could have potentially reached the USA. Now, Donald Trump has tweeted that China could put an end to this nonsense. Not unlike other things we've heard from Donald Trump before, but it does reflect a feeling among many that China is, after all, the biggest ally of North Korea, responsible for about 90% of their trade. But Geng Shuang today added that they remain firmly opposed to North Korea's missile tests, and because they are against the UN Security Council resolution. But as Japan, South Korea, China, and the USA meet at the end of this week at the G20, they're going to be discussing perhaps other ways which they can be applying pressure on North Korea, because so far nothing seems to rein in their nuclear missile ambitions. And what China can do will be core to that discussion.
China is tightening its grip on the internet, and some of the country's most creative minds fear they're next. New regulations are requiring auditors to check all audiovisual content posted online for inappropriate content. Authorities are also clamping down on VPN connections, which have long been a way for many to get around the Great Firewall.
China's sweeping internet crackdown has a new target in its sights, and it's making the likes of filmmakers and bloggers nervous. An industry association circulating new guidelines warning auditors are poring over everything from movies to documentaries and even sports material, making sure it all sticks to what it calls core socialist values. Reuters' Adam Jordan explains who Beijing is keeping tabs on.
The idea is, to direct the conversation that's happening online. I mean, this is the conversation of China's millennials who are very well connected, and the government is very keen to make sure that they are in control, or at least aware of and following the conversation that's happening amongst this very important younger generation.
These tighter rules will impact sites great and small, from social media giant Weibo to niche buzzing online communities. Censorship in China is nothing new, and under President Xi, it's even easier to offend. Gossip websites have recently been taken down and online streaming suspended, all on the grounds of inappropriate content. And authorities aren't just targeting violence and drug abuse.
One of the things that has been included in the list before and in the current list for online is homosexuality, which has caused a big stir in China with people online who have been pointing to this sort of entrenched conservative view over same-sex relationships, despite the fact that in most big Chinese cities there is a thriving gay scene where it's relatively well accepted.
Many in the art scene feel it could spell the end of creativity, but are quick to point out these new rules might be impossible to enforce.
Torrential rain has lashed parts of East and South China, killing more than 30 and forcing hundreds of thousands to evacuate from their homes. Heavy rain and flooding have engulfed provinces including Zhejiang, Jiangxi, Hunan and Guizhou, damaging crops and shelters. State media CCTV showed footage of rescuers helping residents evacuate from their homes. The government is giving out 700 million yuan in emergency aid to the 4 affected provinces to help those who have lost their homes and family members. And local news now, and Chief Executive Carrie Lam this morning defended her newly appointed Executive Council members. That says she put them to work on a slew of new policy ideas in her first EXCO meeting since taking office. Speaking to the media after the meeting, she called the 16 non-government council members wise ones, saying their average age was higher than that of her principal officials. Among the team are finance heavyweights and veteran politicians such as Ip Kwok Him, Ronnie Tong and Regina Ip. Lam brushed aside concerns that some EXCO members also hold duty as legislators, which critics say is a conflict of interest.
The 7 current Legislative Council members who have agreed to serve on the Executive Council are not there to just rubber stamp the government policies or to help us to lobby for Legislative Council members' support. They are there to convey to us the views and sentiments of the Legislative Council members so that these views and opinions could also be taken on board at an early stage.
At the top of EXCO's agenda is the extra $5 billion Carrie Lam wants injected into recurrent education spending. Sources say the government will first spend around $3.7 billion on increasing the teacher-to-student ratio and subsidising some self-financed undergraduate programs. Lam said a consensus on the allocation of resources has been reached in the education sector and that she will unveil details of the plan during LegCo's Q&A session tomorrow. Well, coming up next, the latest from the world of business with Joel Flynn.
Hello, good evening. We kick off with a look at China Evergrande. The country's largest home builder today reported that contracted sales for the first half of the year were up 72% compared to last year. The Hong Kong-listed company reported revenue from contract sales was 244 billion yuan. The company has targeted total sales for the year at 450 billion. Large Chinese developers like Evergrande have continued to do well despite government efforts to cool the property market. Well, following the release of those numbers, shares in Evergrande rose as much as 7% this morning before ultimately falling back down to close to 2.75% at 15.720 points. Ultimately, though, we have had a torrid day on the markets here. The Hang Seng index of leading shares falling 2% earlier in the day before recovering to finish down just over 1.5% at 25,389 points. Tech companies and consumer cyclicals, these are things like housing, entertainment and retail companies, all dragging the price of shares in Hong Kong down. Well, while things haven't looked good for investors here in Hong Kong, in Syria, there is an altogether different type of investment concern. The government there has been holding a tourist investment forum in the capital Damascus, and it's warned that only those who have supported President Bashar al-Assad during its civil war will reap the benefits of its economy. Syrian Prime Minister Emad Khamis said there would be qualitative advantages for friends, adding that 449 investment projects from 2011 to 2017 show foreign investment has remained steady.
The issues of safety and security are clearly important to attracting local and international investments. There are some Syrian and foreign investments that have remained steady throughout the conflict, and we see this in investors who are not afraid of war as they build new projects.
Now, when it comes to sending people files online, Dropbox has been a big choice for many, certainly for some of us here. So much so, in fact, that it's now looking for underwriters for a potential IPO. If it goes ahead, it could be the biggest share offering by a US tech firm since Snap. Fred Katayama has more.
Dropbox is looking for underwriters. Sources told Reuters a data-sharing company could launch an initial public offering later this year. If it does, Dropbox will be the biggest U.S. technology company to go public since Snap. Dropbox declined to comment. Liana Baker covers the story at Reuters.
Dropbox was valued in 2014 at over $10 billion. Sources I'm speaking to don't think a $10 billion valuation will be possible. The big trend right now in IPOs is these down round IPOs. We've seen them a lot. We saw it with Snapchat. We saw it with Box a few years ago, which is Dropbox's biggest competitor. Companies are going public at a lower valuation that they raised money at privately.
Dropbox started in 2007 as a free service for consumers to share large files. It now focuses on selling its services to companies.
Now, many of us will have used deliveries for everything from food to gadgets, but how much easier would it be without the delivery man? That's what grocer Ocado is trying out in the UK. It's using the first self-driving vehicles to make being trialled. David Doyle has more.
Could this be the end for the humble delivery man?
This is Ocado's new self-driving delivery vehicle.
The online-only supermarket has trialled what it calls the UK's first driverless grocery delivery. And tech like this could be rolled out across the world. It's part of an online platform Ocado sells to bricks-and-mortar retailers worldwide. The so-called cargo pod has been developed by tech firm Oxbotica. It follows a set route to customers' doorsteps, the shopping then collected by hitting a button which opens the appropriate container. For these tests, a safety driver and Ocado delivery person were on hand to make sure things ran smoothly. But Ocado says the technology could be in place for fully autonomous delivery vehicles as early as 2021. The vans have to navigate complicated urban environments complete with people, pets and all manner of obstacles. From drones to self-driving trucks, companies are battling to transform how they get goods to